Hey, this is Ariel, and you're listening to the Cyber PR Music Podcast, dispatches for the new music business.
Hello. I have a very amazing guest scheduled for today. She is Miss Angela Beeching. I'm so fascinated by her. She is the author of a book called Beyond Talent. And this book is so rich and dense with how to navigate a successful artist and musician career. It's astounding. So I would love for you to introduce yourself to my tribe. Some of them know who you are, but many have not had the pleasure.
Great. I'm happy to be here. I'm Angela Beeching. I'm a music career coach, and I help musicians get more of their best work out into the world. So for many years, I worked at New England Conservatory and then Indiana University and Manhattan School of Music. And I finally took my own recommendation and went out solo as a music career coach. And I love this work because I'm fascinated with helping musicians find their own path. And every musician is a unique situation. So it really keeps me excited.
Excellent. I know we are in very uncertain times. Tell me a little bit about what are your clients experiencing right now? What seems to be the party line around your artists?
Wow. Well, I have to say, I see people swinging sort of from two extremes. I don't think this is just musicians, but maybe it's more for musicians right now because we all know that this is going to be extended, right? How long it's going to take us to get back into halls. So I see some musicians who are dead set on being super productive and they're like sort of blasting through things and focusing. And on the one hand, that's great, but not if it's at the expense of dealing with the emotions that are really there. So that's at the one extreme. And I have to say there's a lot of social media messaging out there going on right now that makes you feel like you have to be doing that and that there's something wrong if you're not. So there's a lot of shame attached to that. It's unfortunate. And at the other extreme, and I'll see people swing, from one to the other, within a week, right? At the other extreme, we just kind of want to hole up in bed with the covers over our head, because I certainly had many days where I was waking up just hoping that this was all a bad dream. And I find still like pieces of denial creeping in. So I have a lot of empathy for musicians like this because we're all trying to figure out a way to have a regular practice, have a way to keep going, to create some kind of normalcy. And to also be looking ahead to what can we put out there that will be of service to other people and appreciated and help us all move forward.
Totally. And on that note, I mean, I know your clients vary and many of them are academics trying to get full positions, the coveted positions at the universities, but I know you also work with a lot of individual musicians and artists, which is my tribe. Tell me, what has been the thinking? What's been the way that they're beginning to shift? I know you did mention a lot of your musician clients are focused on trying to teach lessons from home.
Yeah, I would say there's one of the best things about being a musician, of course, is that we're multi-talented. And so it's very typical to have the multiple income streams. And in a crazy upheaval like this, the multiple income streams are an advantage because what you see is people recalibrating how they're emphasizing their work. I have a lot of clients who teach privately, and I have a bunch of people who are teaching at universities and colleges. I mean, in many cases, people had really no warning that they were going to have to put everything online. So suddenly, like a gazillion webinars on how to teach successfully online. And this isn't easy, depending on what specifically you're teaching. But I think it's a kind of example of a way to think, how can I use this challenge that I'm in the midst of to deepen my connection with people, to deepen my understanding of my craft and my art. And so even this thing of, okay, I had to scramble to get online. who can I reach out to?
Mm-hmm.
How can I make new connections? How can I learn more and be, see how I could collaborate with other people? So what I see is that in these challenges, some people are reaching out with a spirit of adventure and generosity, as opposed to like the Chicken Little syndrome, which is what my web developer calls it, like the sky is falling. On the one hand, the sky is in some ways falling, but we have to be looking ahead. We need to. So the other thing I just have to keep reminding myself and my clients is the world is always going to need music. This is an essential, even though we're not classified that way technically.
Yeah, musicians should be deemed essential workers. I believe that. So in your book, you elegantly launched into this giant book, which is amazing. This is her third edition. It's Beyond Talent, and it's really a lot about mindset. I really believe that marketing, PR, most of the things that I teach, they all start with an inner game. And when people come to me and they're really hysterical about, social media or whatever, 9 times out of 10, you said it really, really well in our call just now. If you just scratch the surface a little bit, you find out that it's not the how to use Facebook or how do I tweet or what, filter do I use on Instagram. That's not ever the problem. The problem is the exposure that self-marketing produces and the pain of putting all of yourself out there. And the thing that I love so much in your book that you really talk about is the inner critic, which is the theme for today, is how to get that inner critic to shut up. But I think we do have some things to talk about before we go right there, because I think this inner critic shows up not only when you're trying to market and promote and put yourself out there, but it shows up right now in a really loud way, because right now communication and bonding with our tribe, who, if your tribe is 5 people or 5,000 or 500,000, there's going to be that little voice nagging at you. Are you sure you can ask for money right now? Everyone's lost their job, whatever's going through your head. So in the beginning of your book, before we get to the inner critic, you talk about becoming the hero of your own musical journey. Can you explain and define that a little bit?
Yeah, I just have to say I am sort of obsessed or fascinated with the idea of the hero's journey. And if people aren't familiar with that, it's something that the mythologist Joseph Campbell back in the 80s kind of championed this notion. It's the understanding that all of the myths throughout history and cultures, and in fact, all of our favorite films are based on a kind of narrative design, a story plan that you can just see played out through, whether it's Star Wars or The Wizard of Oz or anybody's favorites. And it starts with the hero, our main character, who has a quest, who has something that they want to achieve, something that's sometimes is thrust on them that they refuse at the beginning, but they're going to go after. So if it's Luke Skywalker, it's to like save the universe. And if it's Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, she wants to find a place where there's not going to be any trouble. But what happens when you go on that quest is you are going to find trouble. That is actually life, right? It's what we experience. And along the way, you'll find a mentor and you're going to meet crazy characters and you're going to have to fight dragons. You're going to encounter obstacles that you never imagined. And if this is starting to ring familiar, I want to say it's the typical trial that we go through in the course of our careers, but also in the course of each project that we take on as a musician. So if it's an album that you're going to have to raise money for, if it's a tour that you've decided you really want to make happen, you're going to encounter these kinds of challenges, you're going to have to learn things that you never imagined, and you're going to be tested in some way. Mm-hmm. In a James Bond movie, for instance, there's always this point of no return, right? In any hero's journey. But there's this point where you think for sure the character is going to get it now. And it's the same way, in life. You're going to have to get through that toughest place, and you're going to come through it changed. And you're going to be able to bring back to your community or reintegrate this experience into your life with a new sense of who you are and new possibilities. And that is why we take on projects. That is the purpose. They will, of course, push our careers forward. But win, lose, or draw, we're going to learn a lot about ourselves. And I find this concept of the hero's journey so helpful for musicians, because when you're in the midst of a huge challenge, and right now we're in the midst of a collective hero's journey, mm-hmm. The pandemic is that. We don't know yet how it's going to come out, but we need to be able to remember that we've been through other challenges, and we've learned from them, and we've been able to grow as individuals and as artists from this process. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's so helpful and so grounding.
There's also the writer's journey. Within the journey, and there is another iteration to take into consideration, and that is your story, the story that you're telling. And the story changes as you move through your career. The story that you're telling, as you just mentioned, when you're releasing an EP or a full length or even a single, might be a very different story that you're telling about yourself when you're going on the road, which might be a very different story you're telling about yourself when you're raising money, which might be a very different story you're telling when you take a year off because you've had a tragedy in your life that you need to go deal with, whatever, right? So there's this ebbing and flowing of your story. And I would love to talk a little bit about crafting a story and the difference between a bio and a story. They're really two different things. I'm about to teach a publicity masterclass for Bandzoogle next week, and a giant distinction that everybody in my music PR class had trouble with was the difference between a bio and a pitch. A bio is a very old school kind of consideration, and it should say you went to Juilliard or you went to Berkeley, and here's your story. You started playing when you were 3 years old, and you talk all about sort of the facts of your life. There's often not a hero's journey, and there's often not an interesting nugget in a boring, dry bio. So how do you pull out and evoke story from your client?
Wow, I'm so glad to be talking about this, because it's one of the most basic things that people come to me asking for. And the thing that always happens is people think they want this professional veneer, that they want this kind of professional story that's going to make them feel legit. And they're going to put it on their website, and they're going to use it in grant proposals, and suddenly they'll feel all puffed up. And it's really a shame, because it's this fake layer on top of who they really are. And in our conversations, what I'm trying to help clients do is uncover who they really are. So we talk back and forth. I ask them to tell me stories. One of the things that I love to do is ask them to record their answers on their phone as if they're having a conversation with a favorite aunt or a favorite relative across the kitchen table. And that person is not a musician, but they care about you, or they care about your music, but they don't really understand it. And so they want to know, like, what drives you? What keeps you fascinated with music? And what project are you working on right now that you're really excited about? And the reason I ask them to imagine they're speaking to a loved one in this way is that they're not going to talk down. They're not going to talk jargon. They're not going to try to put on any kind of fake airs. And they're hopefully are going to use direct, concrete language to try to make it clear to another human being what is it that fascinates them. And I think people are frustrated because this doesn't happen really fast. This is a process. If you want a good story, if you want a good grant proposal, if you want a decent bio for your website, whatever it is, I find that this takes 7 rewrites, approximately 7 really revisions to get something that connects with people. And it's totally worth it, because what I've seen is that in this process, people take ownership of who they are. They stop apologizing for who they are. They stop comparing themselves to X, Y, and Z hero out there. And their materials start to feel like, oh, there's a real person there. And of course, that's attractive. It's like, who wouldn't want to connect with that person?
Yeah.
So that's what we're after, making that human connection, to stop thinking about this is about proving myself, and instead, how can I be of service to people? I have this music that I'm fascinated with, and I was fascinated by, and I want to bring the best of myself to others.
And to make that a digestible nugget, right?
Yeah.
So there's one thing to talk about, like a bio, which we don't even call them bios at Cyber PR. We call them signature stories, because we're trying to brainwash people into not doing the list of accolades, which, by the way, the list of accolades is totally fine. If you did go to Juilliard or Berkeley, or you had something really, you won a songwriting competition, all of that is great. However, you can put that somewhere else on your website. Those are career highlights, for example, or my history. You could do a page for that, but do not in 2020 put it in your bio. What Angela is talking about is, how can you be appealing to people? Craig Greenberg, Eli Lev, these are 2 musicians I've known for years. Both of them understand this, how to be appealing. Neither of these artists try to be something that they're not. And they're also not scared of comparison. If you like Billy Joel, you're probably going to like Craig Greenberg. A lot of people don't like Billy Joel, and Craig doesn't care, because he knows that if you like him, you're getting in a wheelhouse. And I think when we write these bios that are full of puffed up stuff, which isn't puffed up, it's probably facts about who you are, and it's not to say that you're being disingenuous. But I think there's fear around, they won't like me if I don't say, you know, my bio, I actually need to change. This is getting old, you know, traveled to all these countries, spoke to all these people. I mean, does that really matter? No, that's not what you're resonating with right here today. We're all locked in our kitchens. It doesn't matter how many times I spoke in France, right? That's not the reason why most people are here.
Yeah, I just want to say, Ariel, what's underneath that, what you were just saying is this fear of not being good enough. It's that thing, you know, will I be accepted? Is it, am I okay? As opposed to coming from a place of, I accept who I am. I have something worthwhile, and I want to offer it to other people. And it's an invitation. You don't have to like it or love it, right? But if it's the right thing, you want the right person to resonate and to be, well, it has to be a call to action, right? It's either going to get us to click play or not.
Right, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about the inner critic, because I think anytime you're going to put yourself on display, whether you choose to kind of frame yourself in a hero's journey, or in a signature story, or in a mini nugget, or in a pitch, or even in a tweet, you're putting yourself out there. And I think especially right now, we're in this time which is so hard on so many of us, and sad and challenging, collectively challenging. But I think that there's a giant differentiation right now between artists who have taken the time to build real fan bases, real tribes, and communicate with them, as Eli Lev has done with his Patreon page, versus people who maybe bought some fake streams on Spotify, or hired a company that said they were getting you real fans, but they didn't quite do that. Those are the artists that I see are suffering right now. And I think when you are beginning to put yourself out there, especially in a time of need, like right now is about bonding with a tribe. And I think when you go to bond with a tribe, and I've experienced this so many times, is your inner critic goes at you. Oh,
Yep.
you're really going to ask 16,000 people to meditate on your mailing list, which is what I did last. And I was scared. I was scared out of my mind. I was like, oh, okay. And I did it because I wanted to take people along on that journey.
Yeah.
But it was uncomfortable. And then weeks before that, I wrote in my newsletter that I had a baby, which was something that I kept secret from my best friends in the industry did not know I was even pregnant because I'm a woman of a certain age and it didn't seem like a great idea to shout it from the rooftop. So anyway, what I'm talking about is exposing yourself, saying something that feels uncomfortable and then worrying about that's what the little voice does. It yells at you. I've named mine. Mine is named Little Nasty because the things that my little nasty says, like these are things that I would literally not say to my worst enemy on earth. And there is my own head talking to me.
Yeah.
So I'm sure with every client you work with, you have a different way of attacking their inner critic, but do you want to speak to this as a...
Yeah. So I'm a big follower, I'm a big fan of these two shrinks based in LA, Barry Michaels and Phil Stutz. They've written 2 books.
Okay.
And I tell you a little bit about them, but these shrinks deal mainly with people in the film industry. So A-list actors, writers, directors, and much of their work has focused on helping people get beyond any kind of creative block. So this is their stuff in terms of the inner critic. The way they talk about it is from Carl Jung's approach of talking about the shadow. So it's the concept that many people have used in a bunch of different ways. It's very old, but this is one way of understanding that voice in our head, which is often multiple voices, because there can be multiple shadows. By the way, the 2 books, the first is called The Tools, and the second is called Coming Alive.
Is this Barry Michaels and Phil Stutz?
Yeah. So these 2 shrinks, they were frustrated with the usual way therapy works, which is you dig into your past and you spend years, let's say, on the couch, just hashing through all of that. And they said they had clients who wanted help with the here and now, with the immediate. So what they developed were a set of combination visualizations and active meditation, like very concrete things that you work on telling yourselves and doing to help you shift your mindset in the moment when you're in trouble with this stuff, so that it gives you a little bit of time, a window to figure out, how do I want to move forward? Because it's so easy for us to get into a loop, into a negative spin. And what can start out as a little bit, a hint of self-doubt, can turn into a crisis.
Mountain. Yeah.
Right. And I always give this example of, it was an email pitch that I knew that I needed to send to New Music Box, this wonderful publication about contemporary music. I wanted to pitch writing a series of articles. And there was no reason for me to be freaked out about this, because I've written for other magazines. I don't know what was in my head. But I'm telling you, Ariel, this went on for months. The thing kept just getting moved on my to-do list. I kept telling myself, I'm just too busy. I'm just too busy. Finally, it was so embarrassing. I was horrified by this, but I was at a tools workshop with those 2 authors, and they're talking about all the inner stuff. And we were on the last day, and I said, I'm going to kill myself if I don't send this email pitch. I had to make what I would call a drop dead deadline, that I wasn't going to go back to the last session unless I had sent that email. And finally, I sent it. And I'm running back over to the workshop, and I'm thinking, why was that so hard? Once you do it, you realize it was just an email. It wasn't life or death.
Right.
And so I just have to say, this thing that happens to us, it snowballs way, way bigger in our heads.
Yeah.
And that thing about having a way to deal with these moments and having something practical to do around this is huge.
Yeah.
They talk about the shadow in terms of a specific tool, and the way to sort of imagine this, and if people want to try it right now in this moment, to think about the last time that you were really embarrassed or afraid of doing something. Maybe it was a public speaking thing, whatever it is. Just take that feeling that you had, the emotion that you had, and push it out in front of you in your imagination so that you can actually see that version of yourself. And just take a really good look. For many people, when they're picturing their shadow, they might picture a younger version of themselves, like middle school. I don't know why. For me, it's like third grade and I don't get picked for the dodgeball team or whatever. Like nobody wants to play with me, something horrible like that. And what you realize is in those moments when we are dealing with that stuff, that is what's coming up. It's like, and we are shaming ourselves.
Yeah. You're not dealing with you, right? You're dealing with an upset 9-year-old. The 9-year-old that's sort of reliving that not getting chosen for the dodgeball moment, which then what did you tell yourself in that moment? I'm not strong enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not clever enough. I'm not whatever stupid story a 9-year-old makes up when they don't get chosen. And then that's little nasty. There's the inner critic right there. And we all have a different version of it. I'm not good enough. That's mine. But some have I'm not enough. And some have like I'm not smart enough. Many musicians that I've encountered have, I'm not talented enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you work with a lot of academics and the currency in that world is I'm not credentialed enough, right? I haven't been published enough times, whatever, you know, is going on there. And so that's a really powerful exercise. Another tip that I have for when those moments are happening and when you feel like your throat is tight and you can't send that stupid email or whatever it is. My mom is a career coach and is a genius. And she used to, when I got really scared or upset, take me through an exercise where she would say, what is the absolute worst outcome? Like, what is the worst, worst thing that could ever happen? Write it down, right? So let's talk about you. You're asking a publication if you can write for free for them. This is hilarious, right? You're a published author, genius with great insights. Like you're doing these people a favor. And this is something I think artists get so disempowered. You make the music. I don't have a job. Angela doesn't have a job if you don't make the music. You drive the ship. And somehow in this crazy ass industry, we then begin to believe that like someone else has the power. This is what I also love about your reference to the hero's journey, because the hero of your journey is not an A&R guy, is not the owner of a record label, is not a booking agent, is not a promoter, even though they would make you think that. Yes, maybe you're lucky enough to have one of those things come along in your very long life, but it is you that evokes and creates, and then it's your responsibility to shut that inner critic up. So imagine the next time you're challenged, literally take yourself through this exercise. What is the worst? Okay, let's go back to you in that email. The worst thing that could have ever happened, well, probably is that they don't answer your email, right?
Right.
And what's so bad about that? Like 90% of the emails I send as a publicist never get answered. Oh, well, you know. Or I guess the worst thing is like they write back and they don't want you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's it.
Right. Yeah. What I realized is I was afraid that they were going to say, sure, write it, because then I was going to have to write this thing. And I knew that it wasn't just one easy piece. It was a series of 4 articles, which of course they were fine with. But that was part of it because I was judging myself so harshly. And that's the thing about the shadow. That 9-year-old or 14-year-old, you know, however old your shadow is, that shadow, her experience of you is that you are the one that's shaming her. And so this thing is like we're trying to divorce ourselves from a key part of our identity. And that shadow is actually the key to our creativity. So I'm working with clients on having the feeling of bringing their shadow with them. Can I write that article with my shadow as a whole person? That to me is just so incredibly fulfilling to hear artists not apologizing for who they really are.
Beautiful. You know, when you can get connected to why it is you want to share your music in the first place, share your art or your voice or whatever it is you're doing, you do leave a better world. And again, that is this empowering notion of putting yourself in the driver's seat versus allowing it to be out there with, again, that magical nobody. So especially with quarantine at this time, we are facing ourselves and our shadow self. I remember the first few days, you know, it was really hard, just this fear. And I know it's ebbing and flowing for so many of us, and we are facing our shadow selves. And I love your practice, Angela, of how can we take that baby shadow with us and parent it and be nice to it and embrace it, or her, the 8-year-old or the 14-year-old or the whatever, and bring them on stage with you and play for them. You know, we have to be gentle. Like you said, this crucifying of yourself that you were doing with the email, that was adding to the not sending it, right? Is just this self-flagellation that we're all so good at. We've gotten so good at that. And I do want to say this before we get off. Right now, during quarantine, during this time, we all have an opportunity to connect with our tribes, our lists, our people in ways that we didn't have 60 days ago. And I want to invite all of you to do that. Do that in whatever way feels good for you. If it's that you have that damn email list that you haven't dusted off in a long time, write a personal email and send it. Even if it's only to 10 people, if you don't have a mailing list. Post something telling on social media. Don't just gloss over. Post something that's visceral and meaningful and exposes you a little bit or a lot, depending on how much you want to go there. But I think you're going to feel less frustrated when you can begin to really connect to whoever it is that's out there that wants to hear from you. And that is what I'm seeing with my clients, is the ones that have taken the time to build their mailing lists, to communicate with authenticity, to not gloss it over. They're the ones who are going to come through this pandemic with a better control over what's going to happen to their future. So I really believe that's something that is so important to do at this juncture. And it's not too late. I know a lot of my clients are very anxious, like, I don't have 20,000 people to talk to. It's okay. Only if you have 20 people to talk to, start there. We've all started somewhere. Think about your first gig. How many people were in the room? Probably wasn't sold out.
Yeah. I think this connecting with people in a genuine way and from a place of generosity, if you can just think about generosity fueling your music making and you communicate from that point of view, it's better for your soul and it's better for your tribe. So I hear that as the undercurrent of your messaging, and I just want to underscore it because that's how we heal. That's how music heals. So let's do it.
I love it. So Angela, where can they find you?
My site is angelabeeching.com, and Beeching has 2 E's. And actually, if you go to the site, there's a little 5-step startup guide. It's a PDF to help you think through what are some action steps I could start going on this week. So I'd love for you guys to try that out.
Excellent.
And yeah, thank you so much, Ariel.
My pleasure. I recommend you head on over to Amazon, pick up Beyond Talent. It's so good. Thank you so much for your time today. And for those of you that are not yet in my music publicity masterclass, jump on over to cyberprmusic.com, sign up. I'd love to have you in it. Anytime you want, Angela, angelabeeching.com. Thank you so much. Everybody have a blessed day, and don't let that little inner critic get at you.
This podcast is brought to you by our friends at Bandzoogle. Built by musicians for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform that makes it easy to build a beautiful website for your music. Enter the code CYBER15 to get your first month absolutely free.